Hi there, I'm Kaylee from Pin Tuck and Pearl, and I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the Joyful Stars Quiltalong that we're doing. This is a pattern by Cotton and Joy. You can get it on our website if you need a copy. And we're going to be talking about cutting today. So before we start, there's a couple of things that we have to talk about before we even get to talking about cutting. One of them is pre-washing. So if you purchased a 5-inch square charm pack to make this quilt, you do not want to pre-wash those. You will put them through the washing machine and they will basically disintegrate. I don't pre-wash any of my quilting fabric. I buy good quality fabric. If it's not hand-dyed or something that I'm very suspect of, I don't pre-wash. I just get right to it. You do, however, want to iron your fabric before we cut it, just so that you have nice clean lines and it's ready to go. So the tools that you are going to need for cutting your fabric, we're going to talk about rotary cutting today, so you'll need a rotary cutter. This one is from Olfa. It's a fun teal color, which is one of our favorite colors here at the store. You can get this on our website if you need one. We also are going to use a 24x6 acrylic ruler. So this is a great tool to have. They do make them in different shapes, sizes, etc. And also a self-healing cutting mat. So we are going to go over to our cutting station. We'll see you there. All right, so we are over here at the cutting table. So you can see that I've got my fabric, the cutting mat right behind it. I folded the fabric in half using selvage to selvage, matching those up, and then in half again. This makes it a little bit easier to cut, just so that I'm not cutting quite as far. All the excess I've got over to the left, I'm not going to worry about that right now, and I'm going to focus on the edge to the right. So I've got my ruler and my rotary cutter. I'm right-handed, so I'm always going to hold my rotary cutter in my right hand. And I'm going to put my finger there just for a little bit of extra stability. So this is open on the rotary cutter. You can see the blade is out, and that's closed. So the blade is covered, can't cut you that way. You always want to make sure that you are closing your rotary cutter when you're not using it. So I've got that opened up. I'm going to line up my ruler so I can trim this first edge here. So I'm lining up with the little dots on the top of the ruler and putting pressure with my left hand. Figure out how to put it there. And cutting straight as I can. Now you'll notice that I did not cut clear through all of those layers. There's 4 layers there, which really shouldn't be too big of a deal, but it took me 2 tries. So that little piece there is scrap, so I'm getting rid of that, and then I'm going to cut the next strip, and instead I really want to measure this part there with the edge of the ruler, but I'm not going to cut over my other arm just because I won't have good control. So I'm going to flip my fabric all the way around, just like that, so that the part that I'm cutting is on the left. Now you have a couple of options. You can either line up with the lines, as they're marked there on the mat, or you can use your ruler. I always use my ruler. Some people do it differently. Mostly the important thing is that you always do it the same way. If you're going to line up with the mat, line up with the mat. If you're going to line up with your ruler, then line up with your ruler. All right, so I am double checking against the pattern what the first size strip I have to cut is. And now I'm going to line up my ruler with that size of the strip. In the pattern, she is really clear about what size strip you need to cut and then how to subcut those to get the squares or rectangles that you need. So I'm pushing really firm pressure with my left hand to hold that ruler steady, and steady pressure with my right hand. As you can see, that didn't quite go through again, so in just a second I'm going to change my rotary blade. This is one of those realities of quilting and sewing, is that you never remember to change your rotary blade until it is way too late and you realize that you probably should have done it much earlier. All right, so I am back with a brand new rotary blade here, and you're going to see what a difference this makes. So I've got that first strip. I don't need that anymore for the moment. Again, I'm going to give myself a little bit more room and line up. Again there. putting steady pressure and right through with one cut. That's really what you want. You don't want to be putting too much pressure with that rotary cutter because that is when you slip and cut something that you don't mean to. All right, so I have lined up here with my second size, doing a nice smooth cut through there. And what you'll notice is that each time I cut a strip, I sort of move it to the side a little bit so that I can see that fresh edge of the fabric that I have so that I can line it up and know that my strips are going to be accurate. All right, so I have lined up the rest of my fabric and sort of shaken that out so it will all sit very nicely there, smoothing it out a little bit from where it was folded over before. And I'm going to keep on cutting strips. All right, so there's one other thing I wanted to show you guys. So right here, I'm cutting that first portion, moving my hand and cutting the second portion. If you are cutting a longer length than you can hold your ruler really steady, you want to walk your hands up the ruler just like that, where you're always holding the part next to the rotary blade steady. What I do is just kind of pause with my rotary blade down and then keep on going. All right, so I've got one strip in front of me here, and I'm going to begin showing you how I subcut these. So as I said, in the pattern, she tells you really clearly how many strips you need to cut and then what units you need to subcut those into. First, I'm going to cut off the selvage edge after lining up with that cut edge of the fabric now. And again, one smooth line, cut right through there. That scrap, it's gone. Again, I'm going to not cut over by crossing my hands. Instead, flip the fabric around. Just like that, so that I can always have that cut edge on the left side and the side that I'm cutting on the right, because I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, you might have to do this backwards so that you can use that rotary blade with your left hand and go from there. So you can line up either with the exact lines on the ruler, or I could usually line up with the dots because I find it easier to see. So cutting those, and each time I want to make sure that I am lining up. If you start cutting these on an angle, you can really kind of go away with that and cut on a much larger angle than you would have intended by the end of your strip. All right, so I've moved those to the side and I've sped this up just a little bit to be able to show you guys the rest of cutting up this strip. So I'm going to get 2 more squares out of this, and then I'm going to take a look at that leftover piece. So that's on the fold. And I'm going to see if it's big enough to make another square. It is not, so that's going to go into my scrap bin, and we will move on to our next strip. I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did before, where I first cut off the selvage, get rid of that, and I'm always closing my rotary blade when I'm putting it down, and making sure that my ruler is flat. That will definitely save you some heartache later. So I'm keeping going, cutting this strip and subcutting as they told us to in the pattern. Gonna make that sure that's flat as I kind of move down the strip here. You might notice that I'm not lining it up with the lines on the mat. As I said before, I line up with my ruler to make sure that my cutting is straight. A little extra piece of thread there. I'm sure that's never happened to any of you. And keeping going. Couple more pieces. Into this one, it's a little bit bigger. So I do have space to cut one final piece here, and a smaller piece will go to my scrap bin. All right. So we are cutting our strips and stuff here for the Joyful Stars Quiltalong. We've cut that center square, those little setting triangles. And if you are cutting from fat quarters, you will need to cut the squares for the background as well. Next, we're going to be cutting the sashing off camera. So next week we will have another video talking to you guys about how to sew those little triangle points for the stars. And then the next week we'll be talking about how to sew it all together and then sew it together with the sashing. We really hope you can join us. We've got a couple links in our description for products and stuff, and hopefully we'll see you next week.